My name is Elizabeth Crane, and I am the mother of Nancy Brownie. I grew up in Texas. I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, but I was reared in Texas, loved Texas. And my mother had lost her first child to a medicine that took her life. It took her 8 months to die. And my mother never got over it, and it affected the rest of our lives. And so I'm here today to share what it's like to lose somebody who has lost their life to addiction. And all the things that I thought I would be concerned about, my reputation, what people would think, how I would behave, none of that mattered when I didn't have the person anymore. Now, I was only 17 when my mother took her life. She did wind up taking her life. But she did reach out in her own way to try to get help. She called her pastor. They didn't have 911 at the time. So she called her pastor and she called her best friend. Now, somebody who really wants to kill themselves doesn't do that. But she had done that time and time before, and they didn't take her seriously. So she passed on. I do believe that she is with the Lord. And so I am in a place to where I know what it's like to actually lose somebody to addiction. And I don't want anybody out there to have to go through that. And I did have a daughter who did struggle with addiction. And let me start a little bit. I mentioned my childhood. But so I was born into the family. There were 4 of us who survived. And my mother's drinking got worse as the years went on. And it's hard with the death of a child. So there was a lot of things that slipped under the radar that my parents were not aware of because they were dealing with their own grief. And this is part of what happens in addiction. Whether it's alcoholism, some kind of sexual addiction, whether it's drug addiction, is the people who have to witness this are traumatized themselves because the family revolves around the most wounded person, and it infects the entire family. And so here were my parents struggling with this death of this child. And so there were so many evil people that came into our lives that they weren't aware of, that were abusing us and hurting us. And I understand that now because God has given me the grace to experience life and to know what pain can do when we don't go to Him, because there aren't answers. But there is help. There isn't the answer like I can do this and I'll get this, how I was used to living life. God will lead us to minister to people who are in addiction. And when my daughter, who was a Division I athlete, started drugs, it was because she had a medical condition. And she had a condition called Arnold-Chiari malformation. And we didn't know she had this. I knew something was terribly wrong with her. Anyways, we found out what it was. But in the meantime, they medicated her. The doctors didn't know what it was. She was in pain. Let's give her painkillers. So I would caution people, first of all, there are appropriate times to use pain medicine, but everybody who does drugs gets addicted. It's not a matter of some people who drink become alcoholics. Not everybody who drinks becomes alcoholics, but everybody who does drugs will become addicted. That's the difference in the two natures of the drugs. Pills in themselves are addictive, and that's what we need to understand. And so we need to approach that and be educated. I knew none of that. So when my daughter's illness was over, I just thought this was more of her illness. I didn't really know what was going on. And what does happen with addiction, as they start to withdraw from the drugs, it creates its own hell, really. And so they want to escape that. And how have they learned to escape? By trying not to feel. And this is my journey in how ultimately God intervened in my life. Give me the gift of tearlessness, Lord. He intervened in my life and showed me that I am powerless to help her, although I am not helpless. Only God can change hearts. And her heart needed to be changed to see that she had a problem that she had to face God with. And the ultimate end of addiction is death. That is the whole plot of the enemy, is to completely destroy our lives. I have heard it said that addiction steals the soul of the addict and breaks the heart of everyone else. And that's exactly what happens. And when I get emotional, it's not because I'm sad. I am so wonderfully grateful to God in heaven and Holy Spirit, who, when I cried out, spoke to my heart through his voice, through people, through circumstances, in so many different ways. He spoke to me. And the beginning was when my daughter's addiction had escalated to the point where she was stealing from me. I fell to my knees because I had done everything I knew to do, including I was going to chain her to her bed and lock her in her room. That was a real thing my husband and I talked about. My son said, I'll call the police if you do that. But this is where, when we come up with these solutions in our minds, is that doesn't work, so I'm going to escalate. And so doing more of something that doesn't work doesn't make it work. We can't fix the mind that we have with the mind that we have. We have to have someone else that has a different way of looking at things and can see eternally. And so we have a problem, we need a problem solver. And I was used to being a problem solver. I'm a mom. I saved her from lots of things during her life. And so I thought I could save her with this too, but I was not capable of doing that. Another aspect that I had to deal with was the guilt of being a parent and not being able to help my child. Now, even though she was 24 years old, for those of you parents out there, understand this. They are still your babies. And so the guilt, trying to figure out, now this is how this went. If I could figure out how I went wrong, then I could go back and fix it. And if I could fix it, then I had power. And if I had power, then I had control. And guess what? That's a big circle. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden you come across your footsteps in the snow and you think it's a way out, but you realize those are my footsteps. I've been here before and I'm going in a big circle. We have to get some way to get out of that loop of thinking that I can keep doing more of the same, thinking the same way, and come out with a different result. So she got to a point where she was stealing from me. And I prayed, I said, God, please help me. Now I'm thinking he's going to give me some answer, something I can do to her to make her change her mind. And he gave me a name of a particular individual in law enforcement who I had known peripherally. I didn't really know him very, very well, but I knew him well enough to call him. And so I did. And I just blurted everything out. I had never talked to him about it before, but God put in my heart. And he said, I have a question for you. Do you want, you have to choose whether you want to go to the graveyard to visit your daughter or you're willing to visit her in jail. Because that is your choice. That is what you're looking at. You think there is something else in mind? There isn't. If she stays out there, I can tell you, she will die. I want you, in my opinion, to have her arrested for what she did. Not something I've ever thought about doing. But at that moment, with that clarity, and that's what came to me in that moment, with that clarity, I could see, because I'd been to my mother's graveside, I didn't want to go to my daughter's graveside. And I called the police, they came, and they arrested her. And there is a whole litany of different decisions that she made for there. But ultimately, it wound up to where she was in jail for I'm going to say around 6 months. And that was the turning point for her, because I no longer made it comfortable for her to make those choices. An addict has, when they really get into their full-blown addiction, or somebody who is addicted, I don't like to call them addicts because we are created for a relationship with Jesus, and we get addicted to things. But God doesn't see us as addicts. She was still my child. I didn't see her as if she was an addiction, but I knew she was in the grips of something that she could not even save herself from. So when God intervened, I had to be in a very different position. I had to go from being a fighter to being a warrior. And I don't know how I can explain that other than a warrior knows how to fight a battle. And I had God as my commander. And that's why I was able to fight this battle, because I have to be honest, there were times I was so in such chaos, it was hard to pray. So again, I could pray, God, what do you want me to know about this? That was kind of my favorite prayer. God, what do you want me to know about this? Call so-and-so and have them pray for you. And I'd call them. And guess what? Sometimes they'd even call me before I called them. God is amazing. And He does hear us. He is there for us. And I would like you to know that there is hope out there, but you cannot make it easy for them. The consequences of their choices, as much as possible, need to fall on them. Now, I'm not saying if they're laying there unconscious, you don't call the ambulance. Obviously, you would call the ambulance. But for instance, they come home, you have a curfew, they spend the night in their car. Whatever it is, whatever God leads you, and it's different with every person. I remember cleaning one day, and I heard this lady weeping. And I remember going over and turning off the vacuum cleaner and going, what's going on? And listening. And this woman's child had been kidnapped from her front yard, right in front of her. And she was at the sink, and this little girl was kidnapped. And this reporter asked what I thought was a stupid question. He said, do you want her to be found? And she said, no, I don't want her to be found. I want her to be rescued. And that's what I'm asking you today. I don't want you to find your child dead. I want your child to be rescued. And this is my experience. This is how God led me. He has done it for me. I know He will do it for you. But we have to ask Him. We have to allow Him to show us the way in only the way that He can. He's the only one that can do this, because He's the only one who can change hearts.